Okay, now we're going to go back into the two squashes on the right side of the canvas. I'm using a glaze, and I'm using that dark blue black with some yellow in it, so it's a green. I'm going over, reestablishing the edge, and I'm noticing that there are some areas that I have left white that I need to go over for craftsmanship. Again, I'm going over the edge with my glaze. And I'm going back into the bottom of the gourd, and I'm making sure that I get all those edges and clean up the edge especially. I'm using a smaller brush for this. And I'm being more specific. I'm using a green with a little bit of the black in it. It's like a yellow-green, kind of a dirty yellow-green glaze. On the left side, and then bringing it down and going over the middle area and going with the contour of the gourd so it is a round object, especially at the bottom. My brush will go in that round direction. And I can blend the two colors together to make more of a subtle transition that I initially had. So as I work on the left side, I'm adding a little bit more yellow as the gourd is in the light on the left side. And I switched to a small brush. If you don't have a small brush, you could use the back of your brush to drag in some lines. Anything, you know, I've used all kinds of things to make lines, including like a dental pick, you know, just the edge, as long as you have something that you can grab paint and drag. So if you want to make those striations thin, you know, and you don't have a small brush. If you use your smallest brush, try just to get the paint on the end of it, and that'll make it smaller as well. And just use the very tip of the brush. And I'm using a really delicate touch for all of this because it's a small area and it's more detailed. So I'm using a yellow-green. I'm going back over some of the paint that we just did, some of the glaze. And I'm trying to get more light so that it looks like it's gradating to the back. And in the front of the gourd, there's more yellow and there's actually a bit of orange. So I'm looking at my picture reference and I'm going into that side. You can see I just added a little bit of the orange that I had from the pumpkin, blending it in. To the green, so it's not entirely orange, but it just shows up in little pieces of light. You can see a reflection of orange. I'm just using really small amounts of color too. And the glaze makes the color move with more fluidity. So at the top of the squash, you know, I have sort of these two colors, the dark and the mid-tone, and I'm blending it together at this point to try to make it look more round. You know, so I might bring a little bit more dark in. It gives us the illusion that it is round by having the gradation. And I'm adding like little striations of line. As if you look at the picture of the gourd, it doesn't have like a perfect solid color. There's a lot of broken color. So I'll be adding that in with just really delicate bits of paint onto the objects. You know, nothing too overly blended. In the middle of that gourd is more of a green, where the left side is more of a yellow green, and then the back goes to a real dark green. So little bits of orange are in that gourd. Obviously, it's brighter as it comes closer to the light. And I'm using a lighter yellow-green for the bigger lines that exist on the gourd. And I'm not making them perfect lines because it's an organic object. But I am going with the shape, so it looks like they're wrapping around the gourd. And as it gets closer to the bottom of it, it's darker. And towards the middle area, it's lighter. And just using tiny bits of paint, a little bit. I'm just using tiny bits of paint to modify what I have already from my very first layer and finding the striations within the gourd and keeping the value structure very similar as to the first pass. Just being more general or be more specific with this layer. You know, making sure that the bottom of the gourd, those edges are dealt with. So if you take your dark glaze, darkest dark that you have on this object, and you really clean up the edges like I'm doing and softly go on the sides of them so that there's no white spots or any ridges that seem like they don't belong there, any unintended marks. This is really what glazing is about, is those final touches. I'm taking a light gray, kind of a little bit of blue in there, and adding a highlight to the top of the gourd. As you know, there is a little bit of light up there. I don't want it to be too blatant, but I do want to add a little bit of highlight there. There's a highlight in the center of it. I'm blending it into the colors that are there. It's not white like we see in cartoons, but it's the color of the object lighter. Unless it was a white object or something very shiny, we really don't need to go over the top with that highlight. And if you do add too much, you can add color to it and blend it out. It's no problem. It's very forgiving. And you can add those yellow lines like I'm doing right now to really make it feel like the gourd that is in our photo. You know, it starts from the top and goes down very thin at the top, a very thin line. And then it thickens out as it goes around the gourd. And obviously the left side has that warmer feel and the right side is the cooler feel. It's nice when we already have laid down some of the values. Because then we can blend them much easier. So now working back into the other gourd, I'm taking that dark blue color on top and I'm attending to the edges of where it sits against the back. And then I'm going in and I'm looking at the photo and I'm looking to see the shapes as well that I missed in the first pass. So there's a few specific shapes on there. I'm not doing the exact replica of it. I'm getting the feel of it. So I'm still looking at my image. I'm still referencing it. I'm using a small brush. And I'll be going back in with some oranges as well as blues and dark greens. As you can see, just going back into those little areas where the orange comes through the black and creates that bright contrast. And it's drier now, so I can go in without, taking some of that black back into the orange. If you have a messy area there, this is a good time to clean that up. And the top part of the gourd is warmer because the pumpkin is reflecting into it, and it gets a little bit more yellow towards the middle where the light is shining, and then as it turns towards the tablecloth, it gets a little bit more neutralized and lighter in some ways, and a little bit of brown. So being specific with that edge of where the black and the orange sit together, just being mindful and using your skills of observation to see where all those colors sit will make this look more realistic. And towards the right side of the gourd, at the bottom of the gourd, it gets to be more green. So you could pull in a little bit of green in there too. And it's just very delicate, like little touches of color. Going back and redefining some more, that blue-green kind of comes into the gourd. In some places it gets a little bit black as well. It's not an even color and it's not evenly distributed. So when I'm working, I'm always looking at my subject matter. I'm looking at my photo reference, and I'm really using that to record what I see on my screen. In this case, I'm using an iPad. You could print it out however you want to do it, but you should definitely be working from the image itself. So it's looking at your image and then painting what you see. And that'll develop your skills a lot more than anything else. So if you want to work from imagination, you can do that, but you'll get better if you work from observation first. So I'm finding some of these organic shapes that are in the gourd, which is a lot of fun. Looking to see where the colors change as it goes around. It gets a little darker towards the left side, and as it comes around, a little bit lighter. So still using glazes so that I can change the color and move it around. I'm not using like a full amount of paint. If you wanted to get more texture on this area especially, you could do that. You could add a little bit of impasto, or as long as you're keeping the same value and color structure, that's really what matters. So that, the paint isn't just randomly placed. So I'm dealing with that left side. The orange on that left side is pretty warm as well. And I'm seeing that some of the back of the gourd comes over the top. So in between, I'm always mixing and washing my brush. If I put a color on that I don't like, I can adjust it pretty quickly. So adding those lines in to the gourd, similar to when we added the brighter areas to the pumpkin. You know, it's organic, so it doesn't have to be a perfect line. I'm not using a ton of pressure. And I'm drawing lightly before I actually commit to where I want the paint to go. I would call this making a map of where I want things to sit before I actually commit to, you know, really painting it out. Then I'm just adjusting it between the lines. There's a few little areas of color. And at the bottom of the gourd, it does get a little bit more brown. And the lines aren't as bright as the top of the gourd because the light isn't hitting those lines the same. So just like little subtle changes in temperature will make a difference in making the object appear rounder. Obviously, going over those edges if you need to, you know, attend to the edges. Now is the layer that you would do it in if you didn't get it the first time. You know, getting some of those yellows into the gourd as well. And I think I can go brighter in that middle area to really show that this is where that light is hitting. And it does go around that sort of handle. And the inside of that handle has some of the colors coming up from the, like a little bit of warmer colors. And then you can add the darks on top of this. And because it's still wet, you get the opportunity to blend things out and make it look not like it's a layer sitting on top of one layer. So you can soften it. And there's little details. There's a little bit of blue in there too. It's tricky to do, to work with something dark next to something so light. You know, but you do have a little bit of blending, but not a ton, because you don't want to get it messy. And the edge of that gourd is more of a neutral color because it is, it's sitting further back in space. It's not like a bright yellow, but it's more neutral. And as you can see, I was painting the form of the gourd in the same direction. The passage of my brush is really, it's round, soft when I'm adding these details. It's not a ton of pressure either. I'm just blending a few things into. And you can be playful with your brush strokes. They don't have to be exactly like mine. So just last minute touches on this. Any areas that I need to be blending or edges I need to look for, these are all things that I would do in my final layer. And again, I'm just going through and I'm making sure that that edge of the gourd isn't rough because it's a smooth object. If it was rough, it would be confusing to the viewer as what the object really was. As all of this is creating the illusion that we have these three objects sitting together in a space on a two-dimensional surface. But it's looking more three-dimensional. Well, I'm just adding a few little touches in here. This area of the gourd you definitely could have, you could go in and do a lot of details with. Even more so than I'm doing. It would just mean more passages of painting. So if you have time for that, and you want to go forth and develop this more, you could. But within our time constraints, I would expect, up to something like this in terms of your level, to the best of your own personal ability. So just finding little lights along that edge. As I look at my reference, I can always find more things to look at and more things to paint. If you're detail-oriented, this is things that you enjoy doing, finding all those details and finding all those color transitions, and, make sure that you budget for your time. And in the next video, we'll go back into the shadows underneath this. So if you go into your shadow, you can fix it in the video, and then a few highlights, a few areas in the foreground, and that'll be it for this painting. But like here, I'm going along this edge. I might need to go in and fix up the shadows that are underneath the objects.